Hi, welcome to another episode of Strategic Insights, providing you with the latest update in the areas of business, technology, and management. I'm your host, Dr. Martin Lockstrom. Let's dive in. Welcome everyone to today's episode. We're diving into a question that's been on the minds of economists, investors, and policymakers alike. Is China heading down the same path as Japan in terms of a real estate crisis, deflation, and low economic growth? To answer this, we'll explore the similarities and differences between China's current economic situation and Japan's so-called lost decades that began in the 1990s. By the end of this discussion, we'll aim to reach a conclusion on whether history is repeating itself or if China's story will take a different turn. Let's start with some context. Japan's economic miracle in the post-World War II era was nothing short of remarkable. By the 1980s, Japan had become the world's second-largest economy, with booming industries, a strong yen, and a real estate market that seemed unstoppable. But by the early 1990s, the bubble burst. Property prices collapsed, banks were saddled with bad debt, and the economy entered a prolonged period of stagnation marked by deflation and low growth. This era, often referred to as Japan's lost decades, has become a cautionary tale for other economies. Now, fast forward to today. China, like Japan in the 1980s, has experienced rapid economic growth, becoming the world's second-largest economy. Its real estate sector has been a key driver of this growth, contributing significantly to GDP and employment. However, in recent years, cracks have begun to show. Property developers are facing a liquidity crisis. Home prices are declining in many cities, and the government is grappling with how to manage the fallout. Add to this the specter of deflation and slowing economic growth, and it's no wonder people are drawing parallels to Japan's experience. Let's begin by examining the similarities between China's current situation and Japan's in the 1990s. The first and most obvious parallel is the real estate bubble. In Japan, the late 1980s saw property prices reach astronomical levels, driven by speculative investments and easy credit. At one point, the land beneath the Imperial Palace in Tokyo was said to be worth more than the entire state of California. When the bubble burst, property values plummeted, leaving banks with massive bad loans and the economy in disarray. China's real estate market has also seen a dramatic rise over the past 2 decades. Companies like Evergrande and Country Garden became giants, fueled by debt and speculative buying. However, the sector has recently faced a severe downturn, with developers defaulting on loans and homebuyers losing confidence. The government's efforts to rein in excessive borrowing have exacerbated the crisis, much like Japan's attempts to tighten monetary policy in the early 1990s. Another similarity is the role of debt. Japan's economy was heavily leveraged, with corporations and households taking on significant debt during the boom years. When the bubble burst, this debt became a millstone around the economy's neck, leading to a prolonged period of deleveraging. Similarly, China's debt levels have soared in recent years, particularly in the corporate and local government sectors. The real estate crisis has exposed the fragility of this debt-driven growth model, raising concerns about financial stability. Finally, both countries have faced demographic challenges. Japan's aging population and declining birth rate have been major headwinds to economic growth, reducing labor force participation and increasing the burden on social services. China is now facing a similar demographic shift, with its population aging rapidly due to the one-child policy and declining fertility rates. This could weigh on long-term growth prospects, just as it did in Japan. While the similarities are striking, there are also important differences that could lead to divergent outcomes. The first key difference is the stage of development. When Japan's bubble burst in the early 1990s, it was already a high-income economy with a mature industrial base. China, on the other hand, is still a middle-income country with significant room for growth. Its per capita GDP is much lower than Japan's was at the time, suggesting that China has more potential to catch up through urbanization, technological advancement, and productivity gains. Another difference lies in the policy response. Japan's handling of its crisis has been criticized as slow and inadequate. The government and central bank were reluctant to take decisive action, allowing the economy to languish for years. In contrast, China's government has shown a willingness to intervene aggressively in the economy. Whether through fiscal stimulus, monetary easing, or regulatory crackdowns, Beijing has demonstrated a capacity to act swiftly, even if the effectiveness of these measures remains to be seen. The structure of the two economies also differs. Japan's economy in the 1990s was heavily reliant on exports and manufacturing, making it vulnerable to external shocks. China, while still export-oriented, has a larger domestic market and a growing services sector. This could provide a buffer against global economic downturns, though it also depends on whether Chinese consumers can sustain spending in the face of economic uncertainty. Finally, China's political system is fundamentally different from Japan's. The Chinese Communist Party maintains tight control over the economy and society, allowing for centralized decision-making and the ability to implement policies without the same level of public scrutiny or opposition. This could enable China to navigate its challenges more effectively, though it also raises risks of misallocation of resources and social unrest if policies fail. One of the most concerning parallels between China and Japan is the threat of deflation. Japan's lost decades were characterized by persistent deflation, which discouraged spending and investment, creating a vicious cycle of low growth. China has recently shown signs of deflationary pressures, with consumer prices falling in some months and producer prices declining for extended periods. This has raised fears that China could be heading down a similar path. That's all for this episode. If you like it, please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button in order to stay up to date with more awesome contents ahead. Until next time, take care. Bye-bye.